Have you ever started telling a story just to look around and realize that, well, nobody's actually paying attention to what you have to say? And if you're a YouTuber, that is kind of a problem. You want people to pay attention when you're telling stories. So that is exactly what we're going to be fixing in today's workshop that is about storytelling for YouTubers. Basically, what you want to achieve is kind of a low frequency hypnosis state in your viewers. But first, if you want to understand what low frequency hypnosis is, we kind of got to go over what high frequency hypnosis is. It's kind of like when you sit down in a movie theater, you look ahead, there's all of these bright colors, explosions going on, there are all of these speakers all around, and your brain basically cannot comprehend more things than what is going on in the movie theater. It is made perfectly in a way that it maximizes for attention because it's so entertaining. There's so many things going on. Well, you kind of want the lowest viable version of this hypnosis. You want people to be paying attention, but not distracted. You want them to get the most value out of your video as possible. It's kind of like listening to lo-fi beats. It's not supposed to be overstimulating, just enough stimulation to drown out the noise of your brain so that you can maximize focus. The things we're going to be covering today is story structure, the flow of attention bumps, value over interesting, be cringe, very important, viewer avatar, causation chain, information novelty, Shrek, also very important, and rehook, how to rehook people. This video is mainly going to be applicable to education YouTubers, but if you're making entertainment content, it is also like most of this thing is just like basic attention psychology, okay? If you manage to implement all of these things, what you're going to get is your viewers to learn more, and as a result, they are going to be thankful to you. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but in some major, like big European cities, there's this scam going around in like Paris and Rome. Basically, there's this dude that comes up to you and he's like super nice, being super friendly, joking around, really lighthearted fun. And he gives you this like friendship bracelet. And you're like, no, thank you, I'm fine. And then he's like, no, it's free. And then he's joking around, gives you the bracelet. And at the very end of this little play that he does, that's when he asks you for some money. So he gives you something for free. He gives you something that you perceive as valuable. He jokes around, is super nice, and then it's basically like a reciprocity scam. Now, of course, when we're making content, we're not trying to scam people, but that is basically what we go off of. If you manage to tell stories very effectively, that also means that people are going to pay attention. Therefore, if they pay attention, they are going to learn more. If they learn more, they are going to be more likely to comment, like, buy your shit, whatever you want. But how would I know this? Why listen to me? Well, I do have a couple of subscribers, I have a few views, and a couple of years of experience. So, the first thing that we gotta address is story structure is actually video structure. The principles in the story structure apply to the whole video itself, and you're going to see this throughout this entire presentation. It's so universal. The laws of story and the laws of video structure are so universal. They are so intertwined that I'm going to be teaching you both, and you're going to benefit insanely, all right? When there's a need to tell a story, that is when you tell a story. To understand when there's a need to tell a story, you need to understand the flow of the viewer's attention. When you're telling a story, you're on a roll. You've increased the intensity of the video, and people are more locked into what you're saying. However, it is harder to convey complex information through story, so you need to switch it up. Story, explanation into story. Now, of course, this is not like it looks very black and white and it's like, oh yeah, it's like 50-50. No, it's like probably more like your video should be 10% story, 20% story, and like 80% explanation. Storytelling is basically smart manipulation of attention and imagination. So first, let's understand the natural flow of attention. This is basically if you peel back all of the layers of storytelling, this is what you have. It's just a manipulation of your imagination, and you're saying fancy words and the viewers feel things. That's basically it, all right? The flow of the viewer's attention is a continuous flow, so you're always paying attention. You're going to pay attention up until there's a break in the flow of the video. You can think of it like a highway. The storyteller, you're laying down this highway, right? And every once in a while, there's going to be a bump on the road. The bump is when you have messed up and your listener is taken out of the hypnosis state. Your listener, the person who is watching your video, is the person behind the wheels, right? He's going along, there's a bump. You know what I mean? It takes them out of this hypnosis, like locked in state. That is when you have messed up. So there are bumps on the road, but what kind of bumps are there? Well, uninteresting information, non-relatable information, long explanations, non-coherent reasoning, bad presentation style, not enough confidence, not enough competence, no new information, going off topic, not valuable, not knowing how to hook, not knowing when to hook, not understanding information expiration timers. These are all of the ways you can mess up the pacing of your video. So let's address these. First, you need to know what to talk about. Naturally, you want to choose something that is interesting. But what does it mean when something is interesting? Out of all of the people depicted, whose backstory would you want to listen to? There are all of these guys, there are these like NPCs going to the right, and there's this one person who is going to the left. Whose person would you want to like, whose story would you be interested in? Of course, the person who's going to the left. If this picture was a story, you would assume the person going to the left is the protagonist. But why? It's because it's out of the ordinary. Everybody is going to the right, so you want to listen to the single person who's going to the left. It's like when you sit down in the cinema. You don't want to sit down and listen for or like watch for 2 hours straight about someone's life that is basically... They are born, they go to a normal school, they live a normal life, they get married, they have 2 normal children, they have normal financial situation. No, you want to go to the cinema and listen to a story about somebody who becomes homeless at the age of 10, wins the lottery, loses everything again, gets adopted by a millionaire, learns all of like, I don't know, like... business. He teaches him like business, and then this person who was once homeless becomes the greatest CEO to ever live, and that's the story of Jeff Bezos. That's something that you would want to watch, right? You don't want to watch some normal person's life. You want to watch some insane, out of the ordinary thing. So, something is interesting when it's out of the ordinary. Something that you haven't heard 1,000 times before, novelty of the information. These are, of course, things we're going to address. When something is packaged in an interesting fashion, story is relatable to the person who's listening. Very, very important. But these definitions are inadequate when it comes to describing how you should be making your videos interesting. And that is why the real reason why people watch education videos is inherently different than why they watch entertainment videos. Now, education and entertainment is kind of like on a spectrum. There are like millions of stopping points between these two. Whereas if you look at like raw education, what you would have is like a textbook, like a university textbook that has no jokes, nothing. And then entertainment, you would have like, I don't know, fucking Coco Melon, Mr. Beast, whatever, right? You have some trash. And then in the middle, you would have something like, I don't know, Vsauce. Or videos, something like this, where I'm joking around, messing about, but like I'm still teaching you something and you're still getting some value out of it. The more relatable and valuable your video is, the more interesting it is going to be for your viewer. You can see the content creator's intent when they're making a video. When they're optimizing for entertainment, they will attempt to make you laugh as soon as the video starts. That is why you will see them skip forward into the video to showcase a funny moment or showcase something absurd and funny. And similarly, the same, I can't see the fucking text, the same goes for education as well. And to maximize this effect, you need to create a viewer avatar. I'm sorry, my camera is blocking the view. Something that is inherently entertaining is also inherently interesting. And when it comes to education content, something that is inherently valuable and relatable to the person who is watching is going to be inherently interesting. And that is why you need to relate it. I cannot highlight it, but that is why you need to relate it back to the viewer. And that is why we need to create a viewer avatar. This maximizes relatability. The broader you go with your messaging, the more people you're going to be able to reach, but it is going to be less relatable to those viewers. It is good to have a rough idea of what your viewer avatar looks like, how old they are, what kind of interests they have, but you don't have to be extremely specific. I feel like this is where people kind of mess up. It's like, oh, what do they eat? Like, it doesn't matter. It is also a good idea to know what problem you're going to be solving for your viewers. If you don't know just yet, that's fine. Just start making broader videos that solve broad problems, and you'll eventually find the audience you resonate with the most. What you're going for is if your viewer can say, oh, this video is for me. That is really nice. It is way more like if they can say this. Like you can think of it in a couple of ways. It's like they first click on the thumbnail, they click on the title, and you think, okay, this person is trying to solve some problem. They're looking for a specific solution to a problem that they have. So you need to play into that. You need to signal that, oh, we're going to be fixing your problem, because they wouldn't have clicked on the video if they don't have that problem. So you need to be signaling, oh, we're going to be solving your problem, and here are all of these little like problems that you might have, and if you solve all of these little problems, then you solve the big problem. So that is how you relate it back to the viewer. And it's, again, you might be like, this isn't storytelling. Brother, like, if they don't pay attention to what you have to say, it doesn't matter if you're like, there was once a beautiful princess. Like, nobody cares. If they don't care about what kind of problem you're solving or whatever, they don't care. It's all about keeping their attention. So now you know who you're talking to, but you still need to know how to package the information. And this is where information novelty, which is just a different word for how new you perceive something. You perceive something as new, then it's novel. If you can convince your viewer that you're about to give them some new discovery that is going to be life or career changing, they're going to pay attention. This guy is a manifestation coach, which is in and of itself is a very questionable thing, but this is what all of these guys do, and you can see this in my videos as well. It's this. It's not really about, this is his thumbnail. This is what we're talking about. It's this overly complex, like, brain kind of, oh, this is how your brain works when you're manifesting this thing, and it's like opening your chakras, and like they use these like heat maps of the brain, and they use like very fancy language to describe something that is very like ordinary. For example, like, I don't know, dopamine, and they like, oh, this is how I reprogrammed my brain, and they show some like overly complex thing, and then they just talk about like atomic habits. And this is exactly what I have done in the very beginning. Low frequency hypnosis. You know what low frequency hypnosis is? This shit doesn't exist. I made this shit up. This doesn't exist. It's not really supposed to do anything besides make you think that I'm going to be talking about some insanely complex topic. But there's a problem when you introduce new topics, which is interesting things have an expiration date. Depending on how valuable and relatable the topic is to your viewer, there's a mental timer that starts in which you need to finish explaining your topic, or they are going to lose interest. So you start talking about a topic, and then just imagine that there's a timer going on in your viewer's head. And depending on how interesting the information and the topic is that you're describing to them, at some point, they're going to stop caring about what you're talking about. So you need to finish it before the timer runs out. The more valuable and relatable it is to the viewer, the longer the timer is. If you go off topic, your timer is extremely short. People don't have time for BS. They want efficient messaging. It's kind of like when you got like you have like a new phone, and it's like, oh, it's so interesting, you want to look at it all the time. And then 2 months later, you're throwing it all over the place because it's not new anymore. It's not interesting anymore. It's kind of like again, same thing. It's like, showcase, there's a little cute elephant. It's a pink elephant. How long, so if I shut up and don't say anything, how long can you look at this elephant and be like, oh, this is cool, this is interesting. You're already losing interest. You're already bored. So let's move on. That is exactly what I'm talking about. Now we have all of the building blocks. However, we still need to put them together. But which piece comes first? This is where information prioritization comes into play. Well, there are two causation chains that you can use to structure your stories and videos. Again, these things are interconnected. They are basically the same thing, just a little different. So there's the first one we're going to be describing is South Park story causation chain. So there are two guys, I think, who made South Park, and they went on to like this university and they made like a presentation, and this is what they explained. It's basically always use but, therefore, and never use and then. So the but therefore rule. There are these plot beats, and then there is but in between. So something happens, but something happens. Something happens, therefore something happens. Something happens, because of this, something happens. Something happens, therefore something happens. Right? So plot beat is basically something that the protagonist wants. This could be a way of interpreting it. And the but therefore, because of this, these basically this, and this. This is the price they pay to get what they want. And if you want, you can keep increasing the price they pay for what they want. So for example, something happens, but they need to pay a price. So something happens, therefore they need to pay an even bigger price. Something happens, and because of this, they need to pay an even bigger price. The reason why I use but and therefore is because you don't want to make a list unless you're making a list. The thing that this accomplishes is very simple. It's basically makes sure that you can find the causations between two things that happen. And this is also important when you're just making like a video like this. I use this rule to make this video so that things kind of makes sense. If you use this rule, you can find like what causes what. It basically brings these things, brings the causations to the forefront. And if you use just and then, you can go infinitely. You can list off so many unimportant things. How to prioritize information, chain of logic. How to determine what piece of information is more important than another piece of information. For nonlinear logic, when tip number 1 doesn't have anything to do with tip number 2, for example, list videos, you prioritize based on the following criteria. The effect on the viewer's life. How much does this piece of information, when implemented, change the viewer's life? So basically, if you're making like a big tip list, like there's 100 tips, and that of course all tips aren't created equal. So you will have some tips that are more useful than others. You basically put your best tip in the beginning. This does a couple of things. It sets kind of an expectation for the rest of the video. So people will think that, oh shit, this guy has a really cool tip in the very beginning, so the rest of the video must be really good as well. This is probably not true, but you still want to do it. How catchy is the information and the novelty of it? So if you have like a very catchy, very useful piece of information, that is what you put first, and then the second most important, third most important, like that. But for linear, chronological logic, what is the most fundamental truth that upholds the topic you're talking about? So for example, for this video, if I started thinking about this, like what is at the very core of storytelling, and it's attention, and it's how could I describe, what is the first thing that I would have to describe in order for me to describe the second thing and the third thing and the fourth thing? And if I describe all of these things, then you understand what storytelling is. And I've come to the realization that first you need to understand like attention and how people pay attention to what you're saying. And that is what I found to be the most fundamental causation for storytelling. It's attention. What is the thing that if you were to take away, everything would fall apart? Yeah, if people don't pay attention to what you're saying, nothing really matters. Or if it's time-based, just go through things one by one as they happened. What is the next logical thing you should explain that builds upon the first thing? And this is because people appreciate continuity and solid reasoning. When you can explain how everything is interconnected and one thing explains the next thing and that thing explains the next, there's a quiet appreciation that you receive, which is attention. People like sound logic. This is why people like, I don't know, like detective movies. You get all of the little like pieces together and then you build your case, and that's when, you know, it all clicks, and that is why people watch it. So you can get the little like clues here and there, and at the end it all kind of works. We don't like when characters and reasoning just pop in and out of existence, so you need to use the two causation chains to maximize the smoothness of your logic and character developments. But there's another way you can make your story and reasoning even smoother, which is segues. This guy is Linus Tech Tips, or just Linus, and he owns the YouTube channel Linus Tech Tips, which is, I think, the biggest or the second biggest tech YouTube channel. And they use a very basic storytelling technique when they need to go from one information to the next, or rather, not even one information to the next, but if there's like a jarring big jump from like, oh, here's this laptop, and now they need to talk about something that, you know, they got sponsored to say, and it's going from a laptop to some stupid fucking video game that nobody gives a shit about. Then they use this thing called segue. So, segue is basically another word for smooth or uninterrupted transition. So as you can see, I started saying that this was my segue, but there's another way you can make your story and reasoning even smoother, which is segues. It starts from one slide and it goes uninterrupted to the next. You do this when you need to break the flow of attention. That's when you need to segue. They do this. You can see it, and if you just watch one of their videos, you don't even have to watch that long. They do it almost every single time within the first minute of the video. They do it like this. This thing is very interesting, but you know what else is interesting? Our sponsor. That's basically how they have done it for 15 years at this point, right? Optimally, you need to do this between every piece of new information / new section of the video. If I go from information number 1 to information number 2, that is when you segue. Oh, yeah, and basically for this next part, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, tell me if it has, but basically when you're in high school, there are these two types of teachers that you have. One comes into the classroom, writes some stuff on the blackboard, and then just dips, does the bare minimum. But there's this other type of teacher that pretty much everybody just liked more, is the person who comes in, this teacher comes in, and then teaches things, and also cracks a lot of jokes, and remembers things about you, and he's telling all of these stories, and as a result, pretty much everybody would pay more attention to what that teacher has to say as opposed to the other one. Now, this story is basically not really going anywhere. It's just to showcase that you can kind of segue into a story by just like, this was like a Family Guy segue. It's like, this reminds me of that time where I don't know, did something, and then they just showcase the story. It's also to showcase that even though I kind of messed up on that storytelling, you pay attention because it's somewhat relatable, because I was talking about high school, and I also made it very personal to you. So I made it relatable. I said like, I don't know if you relate to this. I don't know, like tell me. Yeah. So that's basically why people pay attention. You wouldn't have paid attention if what I was describing is like, guys, do you remember that time when you sit in a helicopter and you press the button and then the helicopter goes boom, 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 boom? Like nobody fucking understands. Nobody has done that. That's not relatable to anybody. So you want to relate it back to the viewer, right? But there's another really similar tactic to creating smooth transitions, which is the problem into solution transition. This is basically like video structure, right? When you're done explaining a topic, you have basically solved a problem for the viewer. There's a relief in tension. Instead of letting the tension die off completely, you revive it by posing another important question that reignites the tension. You pose another problem. You're breathing new life into your video. You make your viewer curious once again. So I've been doing this entire kind of video. Let me show you an example of it. For example, like here, it's like, yeah, this is a segue, but there's another way you can make your story and reasoning even smoother. It just kind of creates more curiosity. You want to figure, oh, it's like, I've solved this problem. It's like, okay, now I kind of understand. Oh, but there's another thing that I need to understand. Okay, cool. I did it here. Now we have all of the building blocks. So I make you think like, oh shit, we're going along the video. Everything is cool. However, we still need to put them together. Oh my god, which piece comes first? Don't worry, buckaroo, just listen to me. This is the solution. Just listen. Information prioritization. That is what I'm talking about, right? You solve one problem, and instead of just being like, oh yeah, just whatever, you pose the next problem. And then you kind of piece it together, and at the end, everybody's happy, right? And also, very important, listen, this is extremely important. If you have gotten any value so far, subscribe and like, all right? Thank you. And here's what you've been waiting for. It's the how to tell a story. This is the kind of shit that people, there are channels that teach this for 100 videos straight. I don't know what is the fucking obsession with this. We'll go through it. I know this is what you want, all right? First, I want you to like write a couple of stories like this. So if you want to post them in the comment section, I'll read your story, all right? Write a story that is using this method of storytelling. I color-coded. This is the same story told twice. So let's go through this. I went to school, but then I got bullied. Therefore, I joined the gym, but I wasn't getting any gains until I figured out how to eat enough protein, and then I got gains. This is a very basic story structure. It's like, I went to school, I was doing an ordinary thing, but then I got bullied, but then something out of the ordinary happened. This is the same thing. Therefore, I joined the gym. Therefore, I wanted to resolve the problem by doing something. But this didn't go smoothly until I figured out how to eat enough protein. But eventually I did something and then won, and then I got gains. This is basically the very basic story structure of every single thing that you have ever seen in history. This is basically the but therefore rule for South Park. This is how Shrek is written, right? Like, I was doing an ordinary thing. Shrek was living in his swamp. But then something out of the ordinary happened. He met a talking donkey. Therefore, and then they also got kidnapped or like taken to the king or some shit. Therefore, I wanted to resolve the problem by doing X, Y, and Z. They are told that if they rescue the princess, they're going to be free, right? Or Shrek is going to get like protection of his swamp or some shit. Therefore, I wanted to resolve the problem by doing X, Y, and Z. So Shrek went and attempted to rescue Fiona. But this didn't go smoothly. There was a big fucking dragon. But eventually I did something and then won. And then Donkey did his thing with the dragon. The rest is fucking history. I think we all know what happens in Shrek, alright? That's Shrek. Alright, that is fucking Shrek. I kind of didn't do the best job at telling the story, but I feel like that is Shrek. That is what Star Wars, that's how Star Wars is written. Okay, fine, but I don't know how to make it sound exciting. Sad. So sad. Alright, don't worry. My guy, it's simple. Just be cringe. Like me. I believe that everybody prefers to learn from someone who sounds like they genuinely care. But nowadays, there seems to be an idea that everybody subscribes to, which makes zero sense in my opinion. Which is, bro, just be nonchalant. Just don't care. Just don't care. Just be chill. You can make almost anything seem embarrassing nowadays. But the truth is, you would rather not even try because at least then you retain the right to say, I could have done it if I tried. But at the end of the day, you're just afraid of failing. Failing is sad, but not even trying is tragic. And being cringe signals that you're not just trying, but you're doing the best you can. You're testing the limits of your voice and message. To me, that sounds like genuine effort. Cringe amplifies your message. Whatever you wanted to say will sound more impactful if you make it cringe. Cringe done correctly will be mistaken for your personality, which is the case for pretty much everybody you know online. Nobody speaks to a camera the way they speak in real life. I think that's what it says. Yeah, this is fucking bars, bro. Like, if you don't, I don't know. If you don't agree with this, I don't know what to tell you. But I can't do this. How do I speak? Don't worry, bro. I got you. Because this is embedded in your genes. These are some cave fellas. These are some cavemen, some 100 to 300,000 years ago, and they are chilling. And these guys have been telling stories for hundreds of thousands of years, and this is basically embedded in your genes. You just don't know how to use your voice. But how do I make it sound interesting? How do I activate that caveman brain of mine and start telling stories about the gods and the hunt and the whatever, right? Well, first you make it cringe. Cringe means that you're uncomfortable. It's just, everything is going to sound uncomfortable. The way I speak right now, if I just listen to this, listen to myself a couple of years back, 4 or 5 years ago, if I started speaking like this, I would have thought that, oh my God, this guy is crazy. What is he doing? If I start speaking to you like this in person, you would probably think it's I'm out of my what is happening? Why is he speaking like that? That is what you would think. But online, because I'm talking into a microphone and I'm talking into a camera, I'm not even like, my hand gestures aren't even that crazy. But I don't gesture like this. I don't sound like this because the microphone kind of eats away like 20% of the excitement. So you need to make it a bit more exciting. And if I want my hand gestures to be better, I'm still kind of improving. I'm not really used to talking to a camera because I've been faceless for so many years. I would probably have to like exaggerate my hand gestures a little bit more, and it's cringe. Like, oh, that was so cringe, haha, it's so cringe. So you're realistically looking for a 6 out of 10 excitement. If you can go to 10, you can go to 6. Now, I've been making like kids content, so it's like that shit, you don't even want to see that, bro. The kids content is crazy nowadays. I cannot compete anymore. Like I was like pretty solid when it comes to like acting and like, trying to sound excited and trying to sound funny. I tried my best. You don't even want to see me try. It's insanely cringe. But the only good thing about that is if you can go to a 10, you can kind of dial it back down and make it a 6 or a 5, which is what I'm doing right now, which is just a normal speech plus a little pep and a little more volume. You need to speak pretty loudly. Speaking like this and presenting like this, it takes way more effort and it's very tiresome actually. And just make it interesting, man. Just be playful, just like have fun. Try to have fun. I know. Everybody's trying to be nonchalant and cool and don't lose aura points, whatever the kids say nowadays. Brother, just make it interesting. And this is what I'm talking about. You need to role play as if you're a master storyteller. How would you read a book for a child? You've done this. Maybe you haven't, but most people have, and they can do this. It's like, how would you read a book for a child? It's like, there was once a beautiful princess, and she lived on a beautiful green hill in a majestic castle. But then, one day, a nasty fucking dragon attacked. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you sound when you're trying to tell a story to a kid. That's how you read, like, a book for a child. That is how you make it interesting for them. Now, I'm not saying that you use that same voice, but just as you put on that persona to tell a story for a child, that is exactly how you want to put on a persona that is a YouTuber persona. That just makes it interesting for everybody, and everybody has fun. And it's more interesting. And if they have a little bit of fun, that also probably means that they're going to learn. And if they learn, then everybody's happy, right? But when do you need to use storytelling when you're making education videos? Telling stories that make what you're teaching more engaging. use it as an intro. There are plenty of people who start their videos by starting up a story, and then they have this entire story kind of like overarch their entire video. You can look at TED Talks. It's very popular with TED Talks. They use it quite often. It's just they tell a story about their tragic childhood, and then they make a bunch of examples how they solved those problems. When you're switching from one information to the next, to introduce a problem that you're later going to solve in the explanation part. This could be like this was a tragic thing, and I used to be I was always shy in school and nobody liked me. But this is how I fixed it, guys, and you just gotta listen to my 50-minute long speech about it, you know? If you're telling a very short story, make sure there's a lesson or a payoff or a conflict/problem introduced. So again, lesson, payoff, conflict/problem, depending on what you're doing. If you want, if you're making education content, you need like a problem that you're going to solve in the explanation part. Without at least one of these, there's no reason to tell a story. It's not really a story without a lesson, payoff, conflict, or a problem. One of these at least minimum. Write down a bunch of stories of yourself and practice them. Record yourself, watch it back, cringe, compare yourself to others. Improve. Yes, you need to, you heard that right. You heard that right. You need to compare yourself to others, because if you don't, how do you know where to set the bar? Yourself? That's, I don't know. Like if you haven't done anything to make yourself the bar, then I don't know. Why would you do that? So yeah, compare yourself to others. And if you are a YouTuber and you want to watch other content like this video I'm actually currently working on. So subscribe so you can see when I upload this. And also, if you want more free content, more free content. I've been doing this for a long time. I can give you a lot of value. So check out my Skool community. And if you enjoyed, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and bye.